Welcome into another episode of the Behind the Wall podcast. Today, we are going to be getting into a little bit of a SMU preview, but we have all next week for that. So just a little one. I want to give you guys a taste of what they do and what they look like. Then we're going to have a little NIL conversations episode. I'm kind of excited to talk about that and some new developments, especially with this new recruiting class that's coming in. And then we are going to do a preview of the 2025 Penn State football schedule. This show is sponsored by Campus Steaks, so go check them out downtown State College. They got the best cheesesteaks in all of Penn State. Okay, before we get into SMU real quick, I want to talk about Andy Kotelnicki, Penn State's offensive coordinator, who was very close to leaving us for the West Virginia head coaching job, but he did not, and I thought announced it in a very fun way. He posted the Leonardo DiCaprio clip from Wolf of Wall Street, "I'm not leaving."
I'm not fucking leaving!
I love it from Kotelnicki. So happy we're going to get a year 2 from him. I don't know if we're going to have Drew Aller. I don't know if it's going to be Bo Prabula. And I have said this before. Kotelnicki's offense, his real offense, is that second half of Wisconsin with Bo Prabula. The offense we see now is a watered-down version with Drew Aller because Drew Aller just isn't as mobile as Kotelnicki generally likes his quarterbacks, but Drew Aller is one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football, so Kotelnicki's going to make it work. But if Drew does go, which I think he's playing well enough to be a first-round draft pick, it could be fun to get year 2 in Kotelnicki's offense where we really get the full deal of that offense. Okay, SMU, quick preview of them. They had one regular season loss. It was 15-18 against BYU, and that was back in week 3. So a long time ago. Since then, 9-game winning streak throughout the season. Hey, look, it's the ACC, but it's their first year in the ACC. They used to be in the AAC. So, hey, to make it to the conference championship, credit to them. Lost to Clemson in overtime by 3. So, in that AC championship. So, they are led by Kevin Jennings, the quarterback. He is, I think, a good passer, but definitely a dual threat quarterback, and expect those read options or quarterback power where he'll just catch it and just keep it and just go straight up the middle. So be on the lookout for those. Now, as far as passing and just receiving threats, they don't even have a receiver that's over 600 yards receiving on the year. But looking at the stats, it's clear they spread it around a lot. So they have 6 guys on their team that have 3 or more receiving touchdowns. And just to give you some perspective, Penn State only has 4 of those guys. 4 guys on the Penn State roster have 3 or more receiving touchdowns. That might not sound like a lot. Oh, it's only 2 more. But that's 2 guys that have 3 touchdowns apiece. So, I mean, that's 6 touchdowns. 6 times 7, 42. So that is 42 points right there for your season. That's a lot. I'm just saying that to have that many guys that can be influential, that's pretty big for a team. Their rushing attack. Rashad Smith is their running back. 1,200 yards, over 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, but most importantly, 6 yards per carry. SMU was chugging away at some of these ACC defenses. Now, their offensive line, I like the matchup. Their left tackle with Abdul Carter, I think Abdul's going to have a fun day. Let me tell you what, because that SMU offensive line is very different from Oregon. Oregon has all the money in the world. SMU was just a group of, it was a group of 5 team just last year. They were in the AAC. They weren't even a Power 4 team. So as much as SMU has had a ton of transfers and are really starting to get up to speed with Power 4 football and recruits, obviously they just made the college football playoffs, they are still a little behind. And what takes the most to catch up? It is both sides of the line, but especially the offensive line when you're jumping from kind of that lower level to higher level. Everybody's got speedsters, but the offensive line and having good quality players. So be on the lookout for that left tackle. I'm going to post clips of that to my Twitter. And, of course, you guys know the film breakdown. Sunday night, SMU's offense coming out. So be on the lookout for that. Well, we are having another whiteout, I guess, against SMU. So, hey, like 3rd one, 4th one of the season. Now, if you live in State College, you know there's no reason to predict the weather when we're 10 days out right now. It could be anything. It could be 5 degrees. It could also be 55 degrees because that is December in State College. That is how it works. So I know you guys love your camo, you PA natives. So try your best to throw on a white jacket or whatever you need to rep the whiteout. All right, so talking about this bracket real quick for Penn State, there are so many people saying Penn State has the most favorable matchup and just the most favorable bracket path. And I completely agree with that. Our first game, we're over a touchdown favorite against SMU. If we were to win, Right now, I think we're about 10.5 point favorite against Boise State. Listen, I know 1-0, but we have fun here behind the wall. So let's talk a little bit more about this, the other side of our bracket. So there's our side, and then there's the other side. The other side of our bracket, so it is Indiana and Notre Dame playing each other. Winner of that goes to play Georgia. Now, so we talk about our first two possible games being very favorable in the playoffs. I I would not be mad at facing Indiana after two playoff wins. Notre Dame is probably the hardest one to face. I think they're pretty solid. But Georgia just announced that Carson Beck will not play in their quarterfinal game. So they obviously have a bye week and then they play. They already ruled Carson Beck out. That tells me he's probably done for the year. So maybe Georgia isn't as strong. I think Carson Beck really was never that good. But hey, more of a product of the talent around him. But still, I don't expect him to play. That's the leader. He's been there for a while. That's going to hurt Georgia. I don't think Penn State and James Franklin will have as favorable of a path in this 12-team playoff ever again. I'm going to be honest, because there's going to be stuff that's changed. Maybe not next year, but I think these automatic bids for the conference winners being 1, 2, 3, and 4, that'll go away. So that first matchup for Penn State just isn't going to be as favorable, or especially the second. You're not going to be facing Boise State in the second round of the playoffs in the future. I just think the NCAA is going to change stuff around a little bit. So this is the year. This is your 22 class was Penn State's best class. Those guys are all in their third year. It's there for the taking. Every opportunity is there. Shout out Oregon, who just beat us, has to go, and they get a bye week, but then they got to probably go play Ohio State in the Rose Bowl in the second round. So good luck to them. We get pretty much as cakewalk schedule as you can get in the playoffs. I'm excited to see what we do with it and if this team can kind of really live up to it. Now, talking about the home playoff game, State College hotels are a hot topic at the moment. And we'll pop it up on the screen. Let's just look at the prices right now. About $115, $120 for a normal night in State College in the hotel. Oh, let's check next weekend. Okay, 11 times more expensive to stay in a hotel next weekend. Now, there's also graduation. I'll give myself a little shout out, graduating in 2 weeks here. Well, I guess next week. God, it's coming quick. But 11 times as expensive? I mean, look, I love America. I love where we live. I'm all for everything. But, I mean, that's just exploiting people. It's wrong, but hey, supply, demand, what are you going to do? My only problem is we're just pricing out most of Nittany Nation. Look, Penn State is made up of blue-collar fans, alumni, people that go, work every day, go to their job, like whatever it is. People don't have this much money to spend. They don't have, and a lot of times, not only is it 11 times as expensive, it's a 2-night minimum. So you're looking at over $2,000 just for hotels. That's what you call pricing out the average fan right there. And then last thing, something to be aware of, college football playoffs is handling all the tickets, all the parking passes, everything. It's up to them. So there's been a lot of talk. Penn State students, Penn State fans that are buying tickets, Penn State fans that are buying parking passes are all reporting that they are buying the tickets, the parking passes, their money is getting taken out of their account, and they're still not getting any confirmation that they actually have the tickets or their parking pass. So, man, it's a little bit of a shit show at the moment, I'm going to be honest. And no Letterman's passes either, college football playoffs. So, hey, I guess if you helped build Penn State, you still don't get any love. So I just had to put that out there. All right, let's transition over to NIL conversations. And if you don't know what this is, I started this back in the summertime. So this is we're putting this within a pod, so it's going to be a little shortened down. But that's coming back after the season ends, where I sit down with a guest and we talk NIL. Normally it's Penn State related. It's someone in Penn State. I had Steve Jones on, and then I had Nate Bauer on. So we're going to continue that. I think Zakee Wheatley Sr., Zakee Wheatley's dad, I'm going to have him on. That might be one. It's going to be fun, but just know it's not boring education NIL. I keep it real with y'all, and we get into the nitty-gritty. Speaking of that, NCAA just released their estimates for how much universities spent on NIL. And to be clear, this is said to be for all sports, not just football, but I think football and basketball make up about 99% of NIL spent at most universities. Now, obviously, some schools, there's exceptions. Penn State spends a lot on wrestling. We don't need to get into how much Carter Starachi makes, but he makes more than, I would say, 99% of the football players. So, yeah, so it goes around. But for the most part, football and basketball make up most of this money that you're looking at right now. But Penn State came in at 11th highest on spending in NIL, $13.7 million. We have said that we're NIL poor. I don't know if being the 11th highest spending team is necessarily poor. I think it correlates with right where we're at in recruiting. Now we finished a little low in recruiting at 18th class that we just signed on December 4th. We finished 18th in the nation, and it kind of not this year, but guess where we finished? We finished 11th in NIL this year, and where did we finish last? And that is on 2023, by the way. This is 13.7 million spent in 2023. Well, where did we finish? Right around, I think when we lost to Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl, we were right around there, in between like 8 to 12 in that area. So it all correlates. NIL recruiting, it's going to matter. Though you can look at those and look where the team finishes 3 years later. There is normally a direct correlation. Now, I don't know if I necessarily fully trust these numbers because they have Oregon that spent $10.6 million, so about $3 million less than Penn State. I don't believe that. Dylan Gabriel alone was over $1 million. You can't tell me any different. So I don't know if I fully trust these numbers. And like I said, maybe this is 2023, so actually that would have been Bo Nix. Still, you can't tell me Bo Nix wasn't more than $1 million. So I don't know. I don't know if I fully believe it. But now some really interesting NIL news that I came across, and this is kind of a glimpse of what NIL conversations will really look like. Yahoo Sports did a really cool article on NIL and really just how messy it's going to get. Because I'm telling you guys now, if you think it's bad, we are just at the tip of the iceberg, man, of where NIL is going to go. And we are, in the infancy stages of where we are actually headed. So I'll put the link in the description if you guys want to read this story, but here's everything you need to know from it. So National Signing Day just happened December 4th. Athletes still sign their national letter of intent. That's what they've been doing for ages. That's NLI. Now, this is expected to be the last time ever that NLIs were signed. From here on out, if a high school prospect decides he wants to go to a university, he'll be signing an NIL agreement. It'll be a name, image, and likeness agreement. Now, that is direct payment from university to player. That is still illegal at this moment. That's why it was National Letter of Intent on December 4th. But come July 1st of 2025, that completely goes away, and you are able to pay directly university to player. Now, keep in mind that July 1st, 2025, that'll matter again in a second. Now, the good part about this, that means that players are signing contracts. So you might sign a 3-year NIL contract, and hey, that transfer portal ain't really an option if you're signed into a binding legal contract, because the ones right now aren't really binding, legal, anything like that. You can say they might be, but they're really not. Now, the only way a player could leave is if he gets released. And yes, released. I'm saying released because that's what we're headed for. Universities are going to be able to release players. That's how it's going to work for poor play, injuries, a guy that's injury prone 3 years in. I don't really want to keep this guy around. I have 105 scholarships. I'm not interested in it. So you may ask, how are student athletes going to graduate? The answer is a lot of them probably aren't. I expect the number, especially of football and basketball players that are graduating, unfortunately, that number is just going to plummet. It's really sad, and that's just kind of the future of college football. Now, there are a couple ways that I think that can get fixed, but no matter what, I think that number, it's going to drop. Now, many players might just drop the student from the student athlete and just be an athlete. So, players are going to start to come to schools just for football. That's been happening, but they had to go to class. Now they might not have to. You might just come play football and not even go to class. Joe Paterno is rolling over in his grave with that one. So the reason that college athletes, and I'm going to say college athletes, I'm not even going to call them student athletes at this point, college athletes can get released because it will be a performance-based contract. It'll be based on, just like the NFL, like what you do, which right now, that's fully illegal in the world of NIL that we are in. We cannot have performance-based contracts, even though we do. Guys are paid way more because they're better. That's how it works. But legally, you cannot. That'll change on July 1st. Okay, so let's go back to the Yahoo article for 1 second. It says in there, quote unquote, many coaches are building rosters without knowing their revenue share and what it will be. That is, the revenue share is how much money schools get from their TV contracts. So you see how that can get messy? He's saying that college coaches are building their rosters, aka promising money to players when they don't even know how much money they're going to get in. Promising money you do not have. That is quite literally the definition of insanity, just poorly run businesses. It's not good. So right now, NIL is pretty much handshake deals. Okay? I'll give you 150K. You come here, we're all good. We're square away with that. And that's why you see lawsuits, guys not getting paid, and all that stuff, because it's all handshake, it's all verbal agreements, because none of it can necessarily. I mean, you can do contracts, but it's just where we're at right now in college football. It's mostly verbal and not binding contracts. But that's going to all go away once we hit July 1st, 2025. Now, stay with me here. The article says NIL collectives are planning to front load deals with athletes as a way to create more dollars for their affiliated schools next year in the settlement about revenue sharing. So, what Yahoo is basically saying there, without saying it, they're saying there's no regulations right now. There is no tracking of money of NIL. There's no binding contracts where we sit with NIL. And generally, that's why people don't support NIL at the moment. That's why a lot of Penn State fans have trouble supporting NIL, because they don't know where the money's going. No one has, when I give 10 grand, unless I get the promise from Coach Franklin himself that it's going to go here, which technically is actually illegal. Coaches can't even dictate that at the moment of where money goes. I don't know. And either way, I don't really know, because it's not disclosed. Now, when we do these NIL contracts instead of national letter of intent, if you are a public state school, so Penn State, Ohio State, that means that you will be paid. You will basically be, when you're an employee, universities of a state university, you have to disclose the payment. So any faculty here at Penn State, if you want to find it, you can find their salary. Now at Michigan, you can't, because that's a private institution. So players at Ohio State, Penn State, any state school, you're going to fully know what they make in their contracts with NIL, but Michigan, Miami, you will not know, because they are private schools. It's pretty amazing. And I think Ohio State's athletic director sums it up when he says there's a lot of work being done right now, but it's about as clear as mud when you're looking at it. It's just, you don't know what's going on. And then on top of that, we got Florida State's AD, Michael Alford. I don't know how I feel about this one. The article says, half jokingly said that universities should give student athletes IOUs because of all the uncertainty right now. Yeah, let's do that. Well, once again, let's promise money you don't have. That makes a lot of sense. So I got one more for you guys. The president of the Collective Association, which that's basically, there's collectives out there that own more collectives. So there are collective managers. So let's say this guy at the Collective Association, they probably manage 30, 40 different collectives from Cal on the West Coast all the way to Rutgers on the East Coast. He was interviewed after signing day and said, this signing period, most schools are laying out revenue sharing numbers in a to be decided way to the athletes they're signing. Excuse me? To be decided? Sign to us. We'll figure out. Maybe I'll give you, that 200K? Maybe. We'll see about it. I can't believe it. Well, welcome to NFL Junior at this point. That is where we are. And you can also expect a college football player association very soon, similar to any other major league, MLB, NFL, obviously NFLPA, Player Association. There's always a lot of talk about them. And so we're going to see a union be formed by the college football players. And I think one of the big things that will be fought for is to still find a way to get players the right to education, but still get paid. I don't know how that's going to work. It's going to be messy, but I would guess that's one of the number one things that the College Football Player Association will want. Now, how this works, and I'll give you an example of the NFLPA and the NFL. It's give and take. So back when the NFL wanted to add a week 18, we were at 17 weeks for the longest time. They wanted to add a week 18, so they said, hey, NFL Player Association, we want to add week 18. NFLPA said, all right, we can do that, but we want 2 extra weeks off in the spring, so take off 2 extra weeks that we have to be here for OTAs, off-season training, and then stop testing for weed too. So that's the type of negotiations, and all those examples I gave were negotiated, not all in one at one time, but those are all, that's why the NFL stopped testing for weed, because the NFL wanted something else, and the players were like, all right, stop testing for this then. And they were like, all right, we can make that deal. So that is kind of how these deals work. So you're going to start to see the NCAA have to make deals with the College Football Player Association. That is where we're headed. So July 1st, all the NIL power is given to the universities. They can do with what they want, and they can pay players directly. We will have a lot of interesting stuff on this coming up. Like I said, NIL conversations, more of this coming soon. But I just wanted to give you a rundown of where we are at, and like I said, how messy it's going to get. Year one salary cap starting July 1st will be about $20.5 million, and that's all revenue sharing. So $20.5 million for the top schools: Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. Now Rutgers ain't getting $20.5 million because it's all from TV deals and media rights deals. Rutgers doesn't bring in that money. So you'll see. So Penn State is around, like I said, it was $14 million, 13.7 in 23, and then in 25 we'll be up to $20.5 million just off of the revenue sharing alone. So that wraps up NIL conversations right there. And let's take a look real quick at this 2025 Penn State football schedule. All right, the Penn State 2025 schedule was released today. And there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of comments on it. First 3 weeks, pretty easy. We go Nevada, FIU, Villanova. So, we started West Virginia this past year. It was cool. But at the end of the day, you ain't getting any love for scheduling hard opponents earlier in the year. You might as well just schedule 3 bad teams and move on, because the college football playoffs doesn't really care too much. And now Ohio State, they got Texas week 1. That should be really fun. At least we'll have some other fun games to watch. So we go 3 games, bye week, and then straight into Oregon. That is for the last week of September. People are saying it might be the whiteout. I don't know what's going to happen with that, because it probably will be a noon game, because Fox are a money-hungry corporation that will never give up money for anything. And as much as I would say, they're not going to make Oregon cross-country for a big game like that, get up at noon, I think they will for their money, because there's no other game, no other Big Ten game that weekend that is even close to Penn State, Oregon. So Fox is going to want that at big noon kickoff. I would expect it to be that. But thankfully, we will be coming off a bye week. We come off a bye week for Oregon and Ohio State. There's mixed feelings there. As a player, I'll just tell you, to have 2 weeks to get ready for that defense or the opposing offense, whatever it is, you got a little more time to plan, scheme things up. If you're Kotelnicki or Tom Allen, come up with a couple extra wrinkles. So having the byes right before them, you can say, hey, we don't play that great off bye weeks and whatnot. That might be kind of true, but at the same time, that extra preparation time is always good. So we go 3 first games, bye week, Oregon. We go out to UCLA, so there is your Cali trip if you're looking to make one. Probably will not be nearly as exciting as Penn State USC this year, but if you want to make a trip out to the West Coast, there is your excuse. Then we got Northwestern, Iowa, bye week, and then week 10 after the bye week, Ohio State. We are at Ohio State. So once again, bye week, that'll be really nice, and we'll have a little bit of time to rest up. I think these bye weeks are scheduled very well. We got a little bit more time in between the bye weeks than we did this year, so that's nice for the guys. Stretch it out a little bit more, because we had a bye week, after week 2, week 3, and then again 2 weeks right after USC. So they weren't very stretched out, 2-3 games. These bye weeks are stretched out by 5 games, so a little bit more beneficial for the players. At Ohio State should be good. We'll see what they're looking like at that point in the year. Like I said, they have Texas, so that is good news. But then we go straight from at Ohio State to at home against Indiana. Who knows if Indiana will be as good? A lot of these teams have like a 1-year run, and then it's kind of like, I don't know. So we'll see what Cignetti's still doing up there. He was getting votes for president in Iowa. He was getting votes to be the president of the United States. I think 350 people voted for him. So a lot of love there in Indiana for their coach. We'll see if it continues. But then we finish at Michigan State versus Nebraska, and then at Rutgers. I wish they would have put at Michigan State last. That's like a Penn State staple to play Michigan State the last game of the season for so long. But let me know your guys' thoughts on the schedule. Is it favorable? It's a lot less favorable, I'll tell you, than this year. We play Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. We just had Ohio State this year. So opportunity, we're back to playing 2 good teams in a year. And then also, out on top of that, maybe Indiana is just as elite next year, maybe even better. And obviously Oregon won't have Dylan Gabriel, but they're going to go out and they'll buy a new quarterback. They do it every damn year. They bought Bo Nix. They bought Dylan Gabriel. I don't think they're that interested in developing Dante Moore, who they took from UCLA, who's a young cat. They're just going to go out and find one of the better mid-tier quarterbacks that's on an okay team and say, hey, come over here. We got the fastest wide receivers, the best O-line, running backs, and a great defense. And then Stein, their offensive coordinator, is a madman. I'm sure they will put together a package with Phil Knight, who basically said, hey, you got a blank checkbook to do whatever you would like. So interesting. I don't really know where I stand on the 2025 schedule. We got so much to go. We don't even know who's going to be the quarterback. All of that. There's a lot to go, but overall, it's going to be harder. I like the layout, though, where the bye weeks are, starting out with 3 scrub teams, can get that mojo. I mean, I will say going into Oregon in week 5, we'll be 3-0 coming off a bye. And everybody's, is Penn State actually good? They played nobody. They didn't play anybody. So I'm sure we'll deal with all of that. But we will get into this more in the offseason. So best believe that. But I appreciate you guys tuning into this episode. I love doing episodes like this. We haven't really done one all year. I don't think I've done one since August because we're kind of we have to follow the pre-games and the post-games. I want to keep you guys up to date on that. But this little off week gave us a little bit of time to do something fun like this. So let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed today's podcast, and also if there's any type of segments or things like that that you would like to see next. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Peace.